1905, a guy by the name of Paul Harris started a club so professionals with diverse backgrounds could exchange ideas, form friendships, and give back to their communities. Rotary's name came from the group's early practice of rotating meetings among the offices of its members. They were committed to service and not afraid to dream big. Today, that club now has 1.2 million members. In 1952, 58,000 cases of polio were reported. Over 3,000 died, and 21,000 were left with paralysis. We began our fight against polio in 1979 with a project to immunize 6 million kids in the Philippines. We went to Mexico, immunized 13 million children. Then we went to South America, Central America. One nation after another became polio-free. We raised $1.6 billion to end polio and teamed with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, World Health Organization, UNICEF, CDC. With our efforts, we even arranged a 4-day ceasefire in the Civil War in the Sudan so we could go in and immunize the children, nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. Today, there are less than 20 people in the world with the disease. We broadened our goals. We set sights on providing not only vaccines, but clean water, sanitation to nations across the globe. We built thousands of WASH programs in over 100 countries, $3 billion on life-changing sustainable projects. We support education. We give scholarships and grants to people who fight for the same beliefs. We give over $7.5 million away yearly. We use terms like service above self. We believe in doing good. We want to make the world a better place. We dream big and have a powerful heart. We're neighbors, friends, leaders, problem solvers who see a world where people unite and take action to create change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. What are we going to battle next? Who's our opponent? We're a team of 1.2 million people and eager to fight. Like Paul Harris stated, whatever Rotary may mean to us, to the world, it'll be known by the results it achieves.
welcome. My name is Ella Pollard, President of the Early Act Club of the University School, sponsored by the Rotary Club of St. Augustine. Early Act are school-wide service clubs for kids between the ages of 5 to 12 years old. I have the honor to introduce our moderator, Mrs. Shelly Das. Shelly Das is an award-winning journalist, producer, and television personality who has practiced in Trinidad and Tobago, the wider Caribbean, and internationally. She led and contributed to editorial content for various news organizations before leaving to serve in Washington, D.C. as a senior political advisor in the cabinet of the Secretary General and Deputy Secretary of the Organization of American States. In Washington, D.C., she was one of the youngest female minor- minorities in a senior international post. Mrs. Das is currently an international consultant for private and corporate clients. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ella, and thank you everyone for joining us this evening. Are you hearing me? Great. I want to thank you all for having this conversation this evening. It is timely, and I know that it will be impactful. There's a value to having conversations that will never, ever, ever decrease, in my opinion. And I think that we need to continue to talk, especially at times like these. Well, my job here this evening is very simple. It's just to introduce our featured speaker and then take some questions. So allow me to do that. Joseph J FitzGerald, he's the acting Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in Port of Spain. He arrived in Trinidad and Tobago in August of 2018 as the Political and Economic Chief. Before that, JJ completed a 3-year tour as the Deputy Political Chief at the Embassy in Bucharest. In addition to his management responsibilities there, he was in charge of the political-military relationship. And from 2010 to 2013, JJ was the political military officer in Bulgaria. He served in the Bureau of International Organizations, the Office of UN Political Affairs, where he covered Africa issues on the UN Security Council from 2007 to 2009. He was consular office at the US Embassy in Lima, Peru, and Kingston, Jamaica. Now, JJ has a Master's of Arts in Strategic Security Studies from the College of Naval Command and Staff in Newport. He also holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science. And prior to entering the US Foreign Service, JJ worked for the US Congress. It's our pleasure to have you this evening, JJ. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. It's such a great honor to be here, back with my friends in Rotarians. A couple years ago, I was honored to have been invited to speak at the St. Augustine meeting around this time, I believe, or maybe it was earlier in the year. But it was a great fun, and you guys do such great work that I'm really honored to be here representing the U.S. Embassy and on behalf of our charge d'affaires, Shante Moore. I would like to give a very nice shout out to Ms. Pollard for her great introduction, as well as Ms. Das for the kind remarks. My remarks will be brief and focused on the U.S. global response to COVID-19. In the Department of Defense, we have this saying that says, be brief, be brilliant, and be gone. And if you can't be brilliant, give us the courtesy to at least do the other two. I also worked for a congressman early in my career who lived by the philosophy of talk, lose, listen, listen, win. So the goal is to just sort of lay out kind of what we're doing, but to save as much time for questions and answers at the end as possible, because that's really what I'm interested in, a dialogue, as Ms. Das said. It's really important in these times to talk and to listen. So, and I'm happy to do that. Before I jump into my opening remarks, I'd also like to begin by taking a moment to wish your Prime Minister, Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley, a safe and speedy recovery. We were very saddened to hear that he was inflicted with COVID. We also want to thank Prime Minister Rowley and his government on their handling of the COVID COVID-19 pandemic in Trinidad and Tobago to date. Some of you may quibble on the margins about the government's delay in opening business, or how many can you have at a social gathering, or the timeliness in receiving vaccines. But I think most of us here would agree that the government has done a great job in keeping infections and deaths well below the global or even regional average. I know personally speaking, as someone living here with a family that of a person that has a medical vulnerability, I've been very appreciative to their efforts, and I have known no better place where I want to have waited out this pandemic than Trinidad and Tobago. So moving on to the question of the day, I'd like to begin with a little bit of context, because I think context always matters. But over the past year, I've seen a lot of criticism in the media, seen and heard in the media and general public in many countries about my country's handling of the pandemic. And frankly, much of that criticism is fair and warranted. After all, the statistics don't lie. And if you take a quick look at the numbers as of April 5th this year, the total number of cases worldwide is 131,370,000. And the US, the total number of cases in the US is 30,870,902. So that's almost 25% of the cases worldwide are in the US. And also keep in mind, that's of a total population of about 328 million. So at least 10% of the population has been infected, of the United States has been infected with COVID. And those are official statistics. That does not include people who actually had the disease, but never were diagnosed because they had no symptoms at all, or only mild symptoms. The next closest in those stats, Brazil has 13 million cases. India has 12.5 million cases, which is almost 3 times less than the US. And then France, Russia, UK have in between 4.3 and 4.8 million, which is even 3 times lower than the tier 2 countries. Still a lot of cases, no doubt, but kind of 3 times lower than the tier 2, and up to 7 to 8 times lower than what the United States has. When we talk about deaths in the world, there's been 2,870,000 deaths that we can attribute to COVID. In the US, we've had 550,000 of those, by far the greatest number, and almost 20% of the total deaths. In Brazil, they've had 336,847, and Mexico 205,000. So clearly, the US did not handle our domestic COVID-19 response. And this, not only did this likely color perceptions of our international response, but as I will talk about in a moment, it certainly has influenced our ability to respond to it. But perceptions aren't always accurate. And first, I'd like to state for the record that over the last 2 decades, no other country has come close to providing the level of global health assistance as the United States. During this time, we delivered a whopping 140 billion, that's billion with a B, dollars in global health assistance. Further, we remain the current largest contributor to global health, including in the COVID-19 response, which we deliver via the Global Fund, the WHO, PEPFAR, and USAID, just to name a few of the bigger venues. While the former US administration takes a lot of the blame for the present dire situation in the US, there is one thing it did very well, and that it deserves to be acknowledged. The former administration facilitated the quickest possible development of a vaccine. Operation Warp Speed directed $18 billion of US taxpayer monies to the development of a working vaccine. Many doubted that it could be done in the year timeframe that was set out, as it had never been done in that quickly before. We should also recall that Dr. Fauci originally had hoped that the vaccine would have a 60% efficacy rate. The Moderna and Pfizer vaccines both have efficacy rates of over 95%. And the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, the other American vaccine, which has a single dose, the two doses that the other two has an efficacy rate of 66.3%, with a much higher rate against a severe form of the disease. As a result of these efforts, the world will eventually be vaccinated much quicker and safer than it would have been without this taxpayer support. So with that important context out of the way, let me fill you in on the current Biden-Harris administration policy. First, President Biden has been quite clear and unapologetic that his first priority must and will be addressing the problem at home, especially as it relates to vaccines. As I just relayed, the US is facing the brunt of the virus. We need to get our house in order before we do much of anything else. But the good news is that we are doing so. And with that, I'd like to provide another set of statistics, this time on vaccinations. As of April 5th, there have been 955,807 vaccinations deployed worldwide, given in 151 separate countries. In the US, we've delivered 150 million vaccines to the US population on the president's 75th day in office. 62 million of our population has been fully vaccinated against the vaccine. President Biden's original goal of 100 million vaccines in his first 100 days was met so easily, he expanded the goal to 200 million in his first 100 days. So that means at this rate, with a population of 320 million, that very shortly in the next few months, we should have close to a fully vaccinated population. Even though the president is focused on vaccinating the American public first, the administration knows we must move with great speed to help vaccinate the rest of the world. On April 5th, the Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, gave a speech outlining our general COVID response, said, and I quote, "The pandemic won't end at home until it ends worldwide." In this speech, he noted that our COVID assistance will be guided by our core values that have always guided our humanitarian assistance. And these include that we will not trade shots for political favors, that we will be honest with our partners, we won't overpromise, and we won't underdeliver. We will maintain the highest standards of vaccines that we send abroad, and we will embrace partnerships like the Quad, which is made up of the US, India, Japan, and Australia, with a goal to increase world vaccine supply and capacity. He also noted that we will take the long view beyond this pandemic. We will work with our partners to reform and strengthen institutions and systems. Number two, we will require countries to commit to transparency and information sharing. We will take a sustainable approach to financing, surge capacity, and accountability. And finally, we will push for a complete and transparent investigation into the origins of this pandemic to be able to avoid, to learn from the mistakes and to be able to avoid this in the future. Of course, actions speak louder than words, so let me relay what tangible actions the administration has taken to assist the global COVID-19 response. From day one, the administration rejoined the World Health Organization and authorized the full payment of dues, debts, and authorization of any donations. In February, President Biden announced $2.8 billion donation to COVAX, an entity that's dedicated to giving low and middle class countries the vaccine. In addition to that $2.8 billion, he offered another $2.8 billion pledge to COVAX that we will fulfill as other countries fill their pledges. The administration separately provided $1.6 billion in emergency economic, health, and humanitarian aid to help governments in international agencies and organizations and NGOs mitigate the effects of COVID-19. This is in addition to the $1.6 billion that the US government has provided from fiscal year 20 through 23 that was given to support immunization efforts. Recently, Congress provided a further $11 billion for America's global COVID response to be used in several ways. First, in providing broad and equitable vaccine access. Second, in providing aid to mitigate the secondary impacts of COVID-19, like hunger. And third, helping countries boost their pandemic preparedness. We have also been creative in our approach. Some of you may have heard that we are lending 4 million doses of AstraZeneca vaccine to Canada and Mexico. 2.5 million will go to Mexico, 1.5 million will go to Canada. These AstraZeneca vaccines were not approved for use in the United States. So instead of keeping them, we decided to lend them to our land neighbors who desperately needed them. So what have we done locally to help Trinidad and Tobago during this pandemic? We've done several things. First, on April 24th, Ambassador Mondello announced that the US government has donated $475,000 to the Ministry of Health to be used in the COVID-19 response in any way that they saw fit. At the same time, we donated $475,000 to CARFA. This was in addition to the $8.5 million that we had given to CARFA over the period of 2010 to 2019 that was used to strengthen the institution, and that resulted in it being better able to respond to the COVID crisis, like in its diagnostics laboratory, which provided 13 Caribbean countries initial assistance. We also provided $267,000 to the Ministry of Health to buy an Abbott molecular PCR machine for testing. In addition, we provided $135,000 to completed projects to build a quarantine facility at the Chaguaramas Heliport, and a further $35,000 to Ministry of Health for COVID relief refrigerators and clinical items. And then a further $75,000 also to the Ministry of Health and personal protective equipment. Finally, and some of the other things that we have done, we provided $15,000 in laptops for schools in Rio Claro, $11,000 for sinks, plumbings, fans, and other COVID-19 necessities at La Ventil schools, 100 K95 face masks and 100 face shields for the Trinidad and Tobago Prison Service. And we've done things such as support our Wiley alumni with a grant for her to create a website that provides COVID-19 assistance to those needed at the following website, www.covidcohesive.com. And it has some really useful tips and assistance available there. So with that, I think I fulfilled my promise to brief, and I am open to any questions you may have.
Thank you, JJ. Prior to this, Maria and the team at the Rotary Club at Maraval at St. Augustine fielded a lot of questions. And the first one that we have relating to what you've just said comes from the Rotary Club of Maraval, from Kelly. And JJ, the question is this: in light of the COVID vaccine delays in distribution here in Trinidad and Tobago, have you been asked for any additional direct donations via what's being seen as vaccine diplomacy, the type of which you granted, the Americans granted Mexico and Canada? Have you been approached by Trinidad and Tobago, any governments of the region, for additional direct vaccines? I know you said cash, but now we're talking about vaccines.
Correct. Yeah, the Prime Minister has stated publicly that they have reached out to President Biden and the administration for vaccines due to the delay in your COVAX vaccines. That is still being under consideration by the Department of State and the U.S. administration. The Prime Minister also approached the administration on behalf of CARICOM, as he's currently the chair of CARICOM. But nothing to report, unfortunately, today. But yes, the request has been made.
What would you say, or would you be able to say, what would determine our priority on that list of requests that I'm sure have been made to the U.S. government?
No, I don't really know how the administration is determining priority. One of the factors that played into the lending of vaccines to Canada and Mexico was obviously proximity to the U.S. and how that could affect the U.S. We at the embassy have made a pitch back to the department that the Caribbean is our third border and should be given all due consideration in that assistance. That's, as I said, still being determined by the administration, but we do, in the State Department at least, recognize kind of the Caribbean as our third border.
This is an interesting one. Basically, you said that the AstraZeneca vaccines that were given to Mexico and Canada were not approved for use in the United States. Is that correct?
They have not been approved yet. They're going on FDA approval. Not to say that they've been denied, but that it just hasn't went through the process yet.
Okay, good. And along those lines, were you comfortable with donations being made of AstraZeneca vaccines at this time without U.S. approval to Mexico and to Canada?
Well, I'm not particularly familiar with the details of that, but I believe at least in Canada, the AstraZeneca vaccine has been approved there, and I'm not familiar with Mexico, but of course, as a sovereign nation, they would have the right to accept the donation or not, based on what they feel was the need. But we felt the least we could do was offer it to them.
Okay. Another one of the questions coming in: what is your view on the promotion of a COVID vaccine passport?
I'm afraid I am not an expert in all things COVID, but I think it makes a lot of sense, just personally speaking, to be able to demonstrate to wherever you want to go that you have had a donation, a vaccination, to give that receiving population, that receiving government, the assurance that you are not likely to transmit COVID. In fact, from what I've read, it's very unlikely for you to transmit COVID.
Now, JJ, you said that 10% of the US population has been infected, according to the latest data. What about the vaccination of Americans in Trinidad and Tobago and in the Caribbean? How is the United States government taking care of that?
Well, protecting American citizens is our number one charge. We take it very seriously. And we have been putting on our website and communicating with American citizens via our consular systems about the latest COVID information. At this time, unfortunately, however, the State Department is not planning to provide vaccines to any Americans overseas. That may change with time, but at the moment, that is the goal. In the US, however, just as in Trinidad and Tobago, we have committed to vaccinating everybody resident in the country, which we think makes sound policy. So we were happy to hear that American citizens living in Trinidad and Tobago, even if they're not a citizen, will be eligible to receive a vaccine once Trinidad and Tobago's received their dosing.
Okay, likewise, what about right now, there's a question about Trinidadians who have not been able to, and by extension, CARICOM nationals, return or travel freely to return to their countries. What are the restrictions right now on non-US citizens being vaccinated in the United States?
My understanding, and again, I'm not a COVID-19 expert, but my understanding is that vaccinations will be made available without asking people's immigration status. So as they may ask them about residency, but in terms of if you're legally or not, I think you just need to provide an address. There was some concerns about showing a residency requirement in terms of, and I think some states do and some states don't, to avoid, and I believe this was early on, to avoid people shopping. If you're a California resident and you're out of vaccines, but Oregon has them, you go up to Oregon and get your vaccine. But I believe it's been rolled out in a way that most of those concerns have went away. I think there's been some concerns by some in America about people going on vaccination holiday. So people just traveling to the U.S. just to get a vaccine, and that's an issue and a problem that the U.S. authorities are trying to figure out. How we can not get into a scenario like that where many people are coming, as we do need them for citizens and residents, regardless of their legal status.
Okay, JJ, we have a number of questions coming in on the chats, questions that have been submitted before to the hosts, and a lot of them are about US green cards and US green card holders and the restrictions. And I'm just going to summarize about 7 questions that we have so far about this. And it essentially comes down to this. With the COVID restrictions and guidelines changes taking place all over the world, is there any flexibility on travel restrictions for US green card holders that are out of the United States for an extended period of time? That question in summary comes from, again, the Rotary Club of Maraval.
Yeah, we realize that's a big concern. Normally, if you're a green card holder, you have to at least spend 1 day a year in the United States. To be honest, I don't know what the current policy is, but what I'll tell people is that our consular section would be happy to take your questions. You can email them at consularpos@state.gov. So consularpos@state.gov. Ask them any questions you have related to visas or green cards, and they're very good at getting responses very quickly.
I know, and I know that we're swamping you with a lot of these questions, and like I said, we summarized about 7, possibly more questions about green issues and travel. But are you concerned that things are taking longer than anyone anticipated to get back to normal in terms of travel into and out of the United States? We know, and can you comment on, we know that there will be an ease in travel restrictions for Americans who have been vaccinated. Are you expecting reciprocity when they land in Trinidad, for example, for them not to be subjected to state quarantine of 10 days, 14 days, 7 days once they have the vaccine?
Well, no, I think we're always very clear with our citizens that when they travel to a foreign country, they are subject to the laws of that country. They don't get any special exceptions because they're American citizens or not. So we have not been approached, nor have we lobbied the government here to give any special exemptions or exceptions for vaccinated Americans. The ease of travel is an interesting question because the United States is welcoming travel from everywhere into the United States. Some places have additional requirements, and we have different state quarantine requirements, which make it difficult. For example, I know New York State had a requirement long before others did, that people had to stay home for 7 days before they could, but there was really no enforcement mechanism, and it was on the honor system, and there was no state officials able to greet people at the airport where we only have federal authorities. So I will say, however, one of our biggest concerns remains here about the borders being closed, and understandably so. But it does make it difficult to get American citizens out who want to leave. Luckily, we were running some flights with JetBlue for a while until demand sort of fell off, and Cal is continuing to do those flights periodically at the moment, which I think is satisfying demand. But it also affects our ability to do visas. So our services that we can provide at the U.S. Embassy are dictated to us by the department, and a lot of that is based on our level. We have a framework that goes from 0 to 3 on COVID, and phase 3 is everything's back to normal, and you can operate per normal. But right now we're not quite there at phase 3. We're at phase 2, even though the conditions here are better than most places in the world, but because the border remains closed. So we're not going to be able to return to normal visa services until we have phase 3, which maybe is a moot point, because as long as the border is closed, there's probably not going to be a lot of people wanting to leave anyway because they might have difficulties coming back. But I know people. We get a lot of questions about when will we return to visa services per normal, and the answer to that question is it depends on when the borders are when the border restrictions are lifted.
Okay, there's again more questions coming in, and a lot of them are COVID related, of course. This one here has to do with COVID-19. This one is from Shadron Collins, and it says COVID-19 has both a health and economic impact. Are there any examples of US economic stimulus policies that seem to be having a positive impact? Can you comment on that?
Well, the U.S. we have approved several trillions of dollars in packages that were geared toward economic stimulus and COVID mitigation. People would comment and criticize because at one point we got a $1,500 check, depending on how much you pay in taxes. Another time we got $600. A third time we got another couple thousand, which is not a lot of money into the pocket of somebody who's unemployed. It may provide a month or two of assistance, but there was also included in there assistance to businesses who had to lay off people to be able to keep people employed, and that had, I think, at least some positive effect. I think without those stimulus packages, things would be a lot worse, I think, in the U.S. than they are now. The president is also currently working on an infrastructure package, which has the potential to help with the COVID-19 economic mitigation as well. But that's, of course, still being debated in the U.S. Congress.
JJ, I know that you praised earlier the handling in Trinidad and Tobago by the government of the situation here. How do you view right now, and this is a question coming in as well via social media, the politicization, or it seems, of a public health crisis? How do you view what seems to be the politicization of it? And I'm not going to go into anything further with that question.
Sure. Well, I would think, that Trinidad and Tobago is not alone. We've seen this in my country and in lots of countries. People are using the crisis to score political points one way or another. I think we all hope that our politicians come together in a time of crisis to do what's in the best interest of the country, wherever that country is. Unfortunately, that doesn't always happen. But I wouldn't say the polarization here is any worse than I've seen around the world.
Okay, this question is from Mr. Singh, and it's to you, JJ. Since the manufacturers of 3 leading vaccines are US-based, is there any initiative that you are aware of to ask companies to waive or modify patents to allow for increased vaccine production worldwide?
I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll look into it, and if I find a response, I'll send it to the group here.
Okay, and then we have another comment coming in about vaccine tourism here in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Are you aware of that? And can you comment? The commenter says busloads of people are coming in from the airport to get vaccinated, stay for a second shot, and then leave. Are you aware of that?
I'm not aware of that. Doesn't surprise me too much, although I'd never thought about U.S. territories. I would think because, at least unless you're getting the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which is 1 dose, it would be a bit of an expensive trip. You have to at least spend 3 to 4 weeks in the U.S. Virgin Islands, which who wouldn't like to do that? But you'll likely have to have some money to be able to pull that off.
Okay. And I know Maria has some other questions coming in as well that she'll be sending to me. But in the meantime, here is a question from Mauricia Lewis. JJ, how have the other American initiatives and projects outside of the COVID-19 discussion been impacted by this situation? We're seeing, of course, a pandemic having an impact on the global economy. How have some of your other projects here in Trinidad and Tobago and the Caribbean, because we have some viewers up and down the islands watching right now, how have the other US projects been impacted?
I would say not too much. We haven't seen a reduction in our assistance, our security, and other types of assistance as a result of COVID. So perhaps that may be the effect of, we work in our budgets several years in advance. So the effect of that still may be to come. One area of the embassy that is struggling, not just here, but globally, is our Consular Affairs Bureau. Our Consular Affairs Bureau is fully funded by its visa fees, visa and ACS, American Citizen Service fees. So with the reduction, with the collapse of global demand for visas and passports, we've been struggling, and we've, for the first time ever, had to request from the Congress additional money to help pay for consular affairs visa services, because they can no longer be self-supporting.
Interesting. I know we have a question from the president of the Rotary Club of St. Augustine, Mr. Budai.
I think he's still on mute.
Mr. Budai, are you there? Let me see.
He's talking,
Krishna.
but he's on mute.
Yeah, Krishna, you have to unmute. You have to unmute.
There we go.
Yeah, sorry, I thought it was unmuted. Let me repeat. Can you share with us the outlook for resumption of tourism to the US in the coming months, given the rapid pace of vaccination in the US, followed by vaccination in many other countries?
Well, that's a little out of my bailiwick. I would assume once we reach the full immunization, or at least reach herd immunity, I suppose people, at least within the United States, will feel safer traveling again. It'll also mean we have less to fear from others traveling from other countries. So I hope it picks up. A lot of our industries, especially tourist industries, have suffered heavily. Poor Disneyland is taking tremendous losses and had to lay off lots of staff. But we're getting there. Like I said, it's been impressive that we've got 200 million, or we will have 200 million vaccinated by the first 3 months, or shortly over the first 3 months of the new administration. With another 3 months, we may be fully there.
Do we have other questions from the floor at this time? JJ, it seems you've been very thorough. Yeah, I think the majority of the questions so far that we have pooled came, and if you could just repeat and recap at this point, came about green cards, travel, visas, and U.S. consular services in Trinidad and Tobago. And if you could just recap what your response to that was for those who joined a little later on.
Yeah, sure. For green cards, like I said, I think any kind of green card or visa question, I could give you my thoughts, but I would hate to give someone the wrong answer. So I would ask you just to email the experts. That's our consular section, and their email is consularpos@state.gov. And I'll go ahead and type that into the chat group here. So everybody has that in their messaging. So what was the other ones you wanted me to recap on?
And the another one coming in, given the possible flood of applications that you are going to receive once the service is fully functional again, do you have the capacity? Will you be able to handle it at that time, when that time?
Oh, you mean in terms of visas?
Yes.
It will be a challenge. Some of the things we've tried to do, we've gotten permission from the department to expand our interview waiver programs. So it used to be that if your visa was expiring within a year, you could send that to us before it expires, and you wouldn't have to appear in person. So we've expanded that to 2 years. So now if your visa is expiring within 2 years, you can send that to us, and we'll be able to work on it while we don't have a lot of capacity to bring people in now to the section. And hopefully with some of these efforts, we'll lower the bottleneck that will eventually happen when service is open. All I can say is it's going to happen. However, the consular section is very good about prioritizing emergency cases. So just using the email address that I've given you, you can flag something for something's urgent once that does happen. So hopefully nobody with an urgent need to get to the US is unable to do so because there was a big backlog.
Okay, great. Do we have any other questions from the floor?
Sorry, this is Noreen Nelia, Acting Public Affairs Officer at the U.S. Embassy. JJ, you just missed it, but that was just extended to 4 years, so 48 months after expiry of the visa, as long as you apply before December 31st of this year. So as long as their visa expired within the last 4 years, they are able to get a new visa without coming in for an interview.
Cool. I did not know that, but there you go. So like I said, if you have the ability, your visa is within the 4-year window, and you don't want to take any risks, go ahead and send it in to us now. It will help us out when we are able to open up again.
Okay, Maria, just guide me if I'm missing anyone. So I'm not seeing any other hands up at this time.
There's just one more question in the chat, posted by Shadron.
Shadron Collins?
Yes.
Okay, JJ, it says, what support can Rotary provide in the COVID-related work activities of the U.S. Embassy?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think we would be open to talking with folks about what possible ideas we could partnership on. We've worked with Rotary, at least I've worked with Rotaries in other places that I've served. So I think we would be open to hearing ideas. Noreen, do you have any ideas off the top of your head? I'm finally finding out Noreen
Yes,
was
actually,
Okay, I think at least I can't hear you. You're
No,
coming in
I
and out.
can't hear your audio either.
Okay, well, no worries, but yes, feel free to
sorry, let me.
I got a sorry, and I thought you were going to come back in, but I'll also provide here to everybody sort of my email address, and if anyone has any ideas on projects we could do together, please feel free to email me, and I'll put you in touch with the right people, and we'll see what we could do.
Okay, and JJ, another question here, more general. Given the change in the U.S. administration, what sort of partnerships might the Caribbean see in the near future?
I'm not sure there'll be any additional. I think the previous administration cooperated quite a bit with different groups. There was a couple of very notable exceptions, the WHO and a few others, but we've had full and good diplomatic relations with all countries in the Caribbean, regardless of the administration, Republican or Democrat, including CARICOM, the OAS, And I suspect that those will continue under the Biden administration.
Are you satisfied with the current relationships between the United States and the Caribbean, CARICOM?
Yeah, I think there's always room for improvement, and there's several things that I think we can do. There's, you know, as you speak of changes in administration, I think one thing that we'll be more open to doing more of is kind of work on environmental issues since we've rejoined the Paris Accord. Yeah, I think things are only going to get better in the next few years.
Okay, any other questions? Maria, are you seeing any hands?
No, nothing else
Okay.
yet. There was one from Hiran and Tani.
Okay, yes, the other question here from him, basically asking again, relates to consular services. Is this extension only for Trinidad and Tobago, or will it be available to all U.S. embassies in the Caribbean and or internationally?
I will defer to Noreen, who saw the latest and not me. I believe these were at least regional, if not worldwide, but Noreen, do you know if it's Trinidad and Tobago specific or not?
No, it's worldwide. So as long as you apply to U.S. Embassy and you have a visa that expired within the last 4 years, you are eligible wherever you are in the world.
Right, and Noreen has also just put into the chat a note that they are recruiting for exchange programs for high school and college students, and they can find more information on the U.S. Embassy websites if you are interested in that, or if your membership is interested in that.
There's one question from Alicia Rogers. I will unmute her because
Yeah.
Alicia, you could go ahead. I know you had a question. Oh, Anne-Marie Rogers.
Okay, good night all. What she was asking is, if you have applications for green cards and everything was already sent from the US and they said it's pending, read Trinidad and Tobago Embassy contacting them. She wanted to know what was the status of that application. Would they have to just wait till the borders are open, or what is the status?
So that's a good question. There was a time when the framework that I mentioned before, where we had to stop even immigrant visa services. The immigrant visa, of course, is what you take up there to get your green card. That has since been restored, and in the last several months, they've been working through the backlog. So I know they're working on it in terms of there's still flights to the US. So as soon as you've done your paperwork and you've gotten the visa in hand, there's nothing stopping you from getting on a Cal flight and heading out on your immigrant visa. But again, I should point out that I'm not a consular officer. I just pretended to be one for 4 years. So if you really want to get the full truth, and please email our consular email address that I provided earlier, consularpos@state.gov.
So,
We'll go ahead and put that as well in the chats.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, yeah, I'm seeing it here. JJ, this one has also just come in. On the point of COVID, the commenter has noticed that in other island territories where the vaccine is being rolled out in a larger quantity, Rotary has partnered with the local health organizations to help with the administering of the vaccine through their volunteers as more of a feet on the ground on the day of itself kind of thing. This may be an immediate need as Rotarians can help with when the country has ramped up its vaccination administration. This may be a possible opportunity to partner with the U.S. Embassy and other organizations. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think there's probably very little that we can do in terms of providing the vaccine administration from the embassy, that's going to be primarily, I think, the government of Trinidad and Tobago. But, you know, in who knows what the future holds. I would certainly encourage the Rotary Club to make your services known to them. I'm happy to mention that in my meetings that I have quite frequently with the Ministry of Health. And if something happens where vaccines become much more readily available and the embassy is bringing in more, sure, I think with the permission, of course, with the government, that's a possibility. But that seems quite a few steps down the road.
Okay, and JJ, I know that we have people joining us from Dominica, from Jamaica, from several islands up and down the Caribbean as well. What are some of your, closing thoughts on this whole situation? Hearing that a lot of the concerns have been about visa status and immigration status and consular services, and just the general level of uncertainty about the COVID situation here in the Caribbean, the uncertainty over our ability to obtain vaccines. Do you have any closing or final comments, or what would you say to people who are very uncertain right now?
Yeah, it's very interesting to see all the visa questions, and especially the green card questions. It reminds me of how close our bonds are between the United States and the Caribbean. I think there's some who worry in Washington that the United States is losing influence to China and other near peer competitors in the region. But I think our familial and historic ties that we have between the two countries will ensure that we're always going to be great partners. I know historically speaking, there have been times in the relationships where the U.S. has taken for granted the Caribbean, and I think and I hope the new administrations have learned from the mistakes of the past. But yeah, it does warm my heart to see that those bonds are still there. Please know that those in the U.S. care very deeply about those in the Caribbean, and we do want to offer our support and assistance as we can. It's what makes working at this embassy so much fun. And I think the even better days are coming.
And what would you say is the greatest challenge right now facing the U.S. Embassy in Trinidad and Tobago at this time?
The greatest challenge at the embassy?
Facing the U.S. Embassy.
Facing the U.S. Embassy, one of our biggest challenges that we have is just we are in a very antiquated building it's not fit for service. It doesn't meet our security specs, and we've outgrown it, and we're actually in 4 separate buildings. So the U.S. Embassy is hoping to buy and build a new embassy in the next several years, which I think would be great. It would be an investment of hundreds of millions of dollars coming into the economy at a time when it's needed, just in the process of building the embassy alone, that is. It would be a great symbol of how important the bilateral relationship is to the two governments. We're making progress. We're still in kind of the land identification stage, but we're hoping very soon to be able to make some kind of announcement of a new facility once this process is going on. But Washington knows that the need is there, and the relationship merits a new embassy. So that's probably my biggest challenge on a day-to-day basis.
Okay. And again, this question, I know you answered it before, but just to recap for those people who joined us late as well, will the U.S. government vaccinate U.S. citizens living overseas, countries like Trinidad and Tobago and everything else in between? Can you just recap what you asked?
Yeah, sure. Of course, as I noted before, there's no greater duty that we have than to take care of our American citizens abroad. We have been putting out lots of announcements via our social media our webpage and through the kind of the different consular systems that we have. Unfortunately, at this time, the State Department is not able to provide vaccinations for all Americans abroad. That's just not in Trinidad and Tobago. That's anywhere. It's not happening anywhere. Doesn't mean that in the future it won't happen, but I think, you know, for the time being, in the short to medium term, probably not going to happen. But we are very grateful and appreciative that the government of Trinidad and Tobago has announced that it will vaccinate all residents living in Trinidad and Tobago, to include American citizens. We will provide more information about this on our website as it becomes available and through our social media.
Okay. JJ, you sound tired, but we have a couple more questions to go. So I'll just put right at you. In light of the pandemic, this one is from Kia Batiste. In light of the pandemic and the current drive towards vaccination, what will be the possible stance of the US government on refugees or those seeking asylum in the near future?
Well, our migration policy is in flux at the moment. You guys have probably seen on the news that there's been a large increase in migrants from Central America at the border. It's taking up a lot of the administration's time. They're trying to work out a humane system to deal with these, as well as to address some of the root problems in their home countries, so that so many people aren't wanting to leave their country, especially all at once. Also, you might have seen that one thing that the administration took immediate action on was providing temporary protective status for Venezuelans. So now Venezuelans who are in the United States are under temporary protective status. So we recognize almost every Venezuelan as a potential refugee. So that's good news for those. Of course, you have your own Venezuela migration issues. We're very thankful and grateful for the government for providing sort of their own, what I would call, temporary protective status through the 16,000 Venezuelans to live and work in Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, we're helping. We've provided about 11 million. The effects of having this increase of Venezuelans in your population.
Okay, I know Nalini Sinanan has another specific question about consular services, and I think that Noreen is responding to her, but just to recap, she's specifically asking about the consula's preparations for the bottleneck of first-time applications in this situation. And Noreen has just reiterated to contact the Consular Court of Spain at state.gov email. Is there anything you would like to add to that?
No, it's challenging. A lot of it will depend on, what the government of Trinidad and Tobago policy is. So right now, we can't have gatherings of more than 10 people, which means we can't have more than 10 people in our waiting room at any one time. And we don't want to have 100 people waiting in line outside. So it's something that, we're thinking about, we're working on, but exactly what the solution will be kind of depends on the circumstances.
Okay, any other questions coming in from the floor? Well, JJ, before we wrap up, finally, what's your frame of mind heading into the rest of this year as we look at the situation? Are you hopeful? Are you anxious? Are you concerned? What's your frame of mind moving forward? We are into our second year of a global health emergency pandemic.
Yeah, I would say there's, I suppose, two sides of the coins, and I think we're in a race against time, which is why I think it was so important what Secretary Blinken said in a speech of April 5th, that we cannot be assured of our own safety in the United States until we've taken care of the entire world. And it's kind of a statement of the times we live in. I'm hopeful that the vaccines are rolling out, and they're being rolled out very effectively, at least in some parts of the world. Access to them hasn't been equitable, as many know, but we're hoping that, you know, that'll loosen up as more vaccines come online and as other countries reach higher capacity and vaccinations. But I'm also at the same time sort of worried about some of the mutations of the virus that are coming out. The recent one out of Brazil has really hit South America hard. You know, it looks like it'll still be covered. The vaccination is still effective against it, but you know, we may face a time where a variant comes off that isn't, and then we're back at phase 0. But I would say, at least I would hope that we are sort of over the hill. We've reached the climax, and we're racing toward life as we know it, returning to normal. But you know, there's still some X factors out there.
Well, JJ, we want to thank you for being put in the hot seat tonight. We had over 100 people from countries up and down the Caribbean, many Rotarians, 7 Rotary clubs. This is a very timely conversation to have. I know you couldn't answer, and you're not, you know, the all-seeing person in the United States to answer all questions, but I thank you so much for trying and for your input and for your insights and your opinion as well. We want to introduce now David Edwards. He is the past district governor and member of the Rotary International Membership Committee, and he will be wrapping us up. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Shelly, and good evening to everyone. It's a pleasure to offer a vote of thanks to JJ. When I saw his bio, from the time you see J and FitzGerald with an American, you automatically think the next thing coming is Kennedy. But those are big shoes to fill, JJ, and you certainly did a great job this afternoon. So thank you for that. I know there's a lot of concern over the not only the availability of vaccines worldwide, but it seems as though the problem is not the funding, which your government has very kindly played a big part. But I think it seems worldwide that we have a problem with the logistics and the equity and how it is being distributed, and it being the vaccines themselves to the countries around the world. So I think as a grouping worldwide, all of us need to solve that logistical problem to make sure that vaccines reach everyone everywhere in a timely manner. We know that it's not possible for everyone to get at the same time, but it has to be in a timely manner. So thank you for that. It's been very thought-provoking. We are much more informed of what you and your government have done and are doing and can do. And we all appreciate that and hope that going forward, next year, this time when the clubs in Trinidad, these clubs that have gotten together in this great presentation this afternoon, when they invite you back next year, that you would be, we will not be speaking of COVID, we would be in a completely different world, hopefully. So on behalf of all here from across the Caribbean and especially the clubs in Trinidad who organized this, and to our presenter, Shelly, thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be here. I just wanted to note that I did see people on here from Canada, from the Great Britain, from everywhere, and I think that's one of the great things about Rotarians, is that you have these wonderful international connections. And I am actually due to depart the embassy. I've been here 3 years. It's my time to go on. But please do continue to invite the U.S. Embassy to come to your meetings. We do want to get out. We do want to engage, and we're happy to do so.
Thank you. And good luck in your next endeavor, wherever that may be.
Back to Washington. Nothing exciting.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks everyone for attending this evening.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.